Evening, everybody. Welcome. I am Joelle. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Silver Spring, and I direct Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm here with a number of colleagues. I know for sure that I see Maddie and Ethan and Nils. Um, Before we begin, I wanted to start with a brief land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway peoples. Their presence is imbued in the lands and waters surrounding us. May we nurture our relationship with our Indigenous neighbors and the shared responsibilities to their homelands where we all reside today. And I'll hand it off to my co-host, Stu.
Hi, everyone. Let me bring up my Stu Simon with MCFACS, Montgomery County Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. We are co-hosts for tonight's program. MCFACS is comprised of representatives from numerous congregations of many faiths all across the county. Our mission is to learn, educate, and advocate at the county level to act as good stewards, preserving our fruitful earth for future generations. For the past 5 years, MCFACS has helped lead the advocacy campaign to support and pass the BE, the Building Energy Performance Standards. Now that, otherwise known as BEPS, now that the BEPS regulations have been approved, took a long time, but we succeeded, we're proud to co-sponsor this webinar with Interfaith Power and Light. So why BEPS? Buildings in the county account for half of the county's carbon footprint. Full enactment of BEPS standards is projected to reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions by 19 to 26% based on the current makeup of our electricity generation, and by up to 96% if we clean our electricity grid at the generation level. Why this webinar? If you plan ahead, and now's the time because final targets are 2031 and 2036, but if you plan ahead to have proper replacement of your energy generations as it comes due, you'll actually come out ahead financially, not just cleaning the earth, but you'll actually save yourself money. So with no further ado, I want to turn the program back over to Joelle. And thank you for all MC-Faxers who are participating in this webinar.
Yes, we love working together with MCFACS in particular to speak out and affirm the value of these building energy performance standards. So what we're going to learn tonight is about how Montgomery County's building energy performance requirements, BEPS, you have probably already heard that pronunciation, impact our congregations and our schools, how it has required our faith communities to take an accounting of how much energy our facilities are using now, and to use this information to undertake energy upgrades and clean energy projects. But before I hand over the mic to my colleagues Maddie and Nils from our Clean Energy Shepherd program, I want to say two things. The first one is, and you already heard this from Stu, our religious communities support BEPS. We support the laws that create these standards. We have fought for the legislation that established BEPS in DC, in Maryland, and in Montgomery County. We have pushed back against efforts to exempt houses of worship from these laws because we want to do our part and we're committed to living out our own values. And our Clean Energy Shepherd program, led by Maddie and Nils, who are on the call tonight, has coached dozens of congregations through the process of compliance with these laws. We want our sanctuaries and schools to play our part in bringing down energy use across the region. And we know that taking an accounting can be sacred work, keeping count of how our congregations are using resources and impacting our climate, as Stu said. It can help us operate our holy places with greater wisdom about how we impact our neighbors and our common home. So the theme of tonight is based on the Jewish tradition of counting the Omer. We open tonight with music composed and sung by Rabbi Yosef Goldman, who until recently served Congregation Sharei Torah here in Montgomery County in Gaithersburg. And my Jewish communities in Montgomery County have been in a time of counting called Sfirat HaOmer, which recalls an agricultural practice of bringing sheaves of barley, each unit an Omer, as offerings to the temple. But Jewish tradition came to give this counting kind of a spiritual meaning, because it enumerates the 7 weeks between Passover, a holiday when we celebrate freedom, all the way to Shavuot, a holiday that's going to start tomorrow at sundown, the holiday on which we enter into a covenant and promise to live in a holy way. So counting can take us towards new commitments and greater alignment with how we want to be in the world. I was so excited personally when I realized that we could gather for this BEPS webinar tonight on the final night of Omer counting to come together across our diverse sacred traditions, to do some journeying of our own, to make sure our own energy accounting that BEPS has already required of us takes us where we all need to go towards making the changes to our buildings that we are called to over the coming years. And I'll pass it back
Okay.
to Stu for an overview of tonight's agenda.
Okay. So tonight we'll hear from Maddie Smith. I don't know if Maddie want to raise your hand, from Interfaith Power and Light's Clean Energy Shepherd program. We'll learn about what BEPS in Montgomery County means for our congregations, how to look up where your own facilities stand on the county's website under the Energy BEPS baseline, and what resources are available to your congregation, both financially and technically, to help you meet those targets. Maddie?
Thanks, Stu and Joelle. Good to see everyone. Hi, my name is Maddie Smith. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Clean Energy Shepherd at Interfaith Power and Light DMV, which I think is like the coolest job title one could have. And what I do in that work is I work closely with houses of worship one-on-one to support folks just like yourselves through things like solar projects, energy efficiency, electrification, and also this, big acronym BEPS. Like what we're going to talk all about. What is BEPS? What do you need to know about BEPS? And then more importantly, whether or not your building is subject to BEPS or not. Tonight, we're going to talk about specific resources and things that are available to houses of worship of any size in the county and how we can work together to hopefully save you all some energy and money that I'm sure you would love to not be spending on energy bills. I hear all the time from folks about how high energy bills are getting, and it's a big concern outside of BEPS. So let me share my screen really quickly.
As you start the slides, do you want to introduce Emily?
Emily is here from the county who knows a lot about BEPS too, and so anything that I can't answer, I imagine that Emily can probably answer. So thanks for being here, Emily. Okay. All right. So I love this picture, first of all, on here is of a church in Montgomery County that just went solar, and we'll talk a little bit about later about how that fits into BEPS. So what are BEPS? So this acronym BEPS stands for Building Energy Performance Standards. And that's a law that's on the books in Montgomery County that requires buildings above a certain size to both benchmark their energy usage. And so what that means is that many of you are already doing this and recording, like keeping track of what your bills say every month and then submitting that to the Montgomery County government. If folks need help with benchmarking, we can absolutely help with that. But today, what we want to focus on is the actual performance standards that folks will be required to meet. So Montgomery County has all of these different categories of buildings, these, the county-owned buildings, group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5. So really what we're focused on today are the non-residential buildings, mainly above 25,000 square feet. And so you can see here the dates for when folks have to meet a standard. So, unless you have a really huge building that's over 50,000 square feet, most folks here are going to be in group 3, this non-residential 25K to 50K gross square feet. And the time that we have to meet these specific standards, which I'll talk about in a minute, is there's an interim deadline to meet a standard and like basically 2031. And then 2036. So just at the end of 2030 and the very end of 2035. And so this means that right now is really the time to be thinking about, if my building is not meeting a standard, or if we're close, what are we going to do in the next 5 and 10 years to be able to meet that standard, hopefully. And ideally to be able to do it, in a way that's affordable and makes sense for each individual building. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Ooh, this is a little blurrier than I intended it to be. I think it still illustrates our point. And so this illustrates how Montgomery County does these standards of there's an interim standard and then the final standard. And these standards are set by building type. So there's one specific standard for, grocery stores. There's a standard for worship facilities. There's a separate standard for K through 12 schools. Preschools and daycares also have a standard. And so everybody has to meet this final standard. And then your interim standard is set at halfway between where you are right now and where you'll need to be. So it's kind of like a halfway kind of check-in measurement point of, are you meeting an interim standard? And you can see, like in this chart, these 3 lines that represent 3 different buildings that sort of start out at very different places. And so they have different interim standards, but they all have to meet this final standard. And for most buildings here, that's going to be 2031 for the interim standard and 2036 for the final standard. So it's good to think about this now instead of in, 4 years when you don't have as much time and you're starting to feel stressed about this. So here, I should have used a different color here, but these are the numbers that are the standards for the different types of buildings that we're talking about today. So most folks here are from houses of worship. That standard is an energy use intensity, they call it, of 32 kBTU per square foot. And so that's a measurement of how much energy you're using per square foot of your building. So it's a way to compare different size buildings to each other. The standard for K through 12 schools is 38. And then I put in preschool/daycare here too, because many houses of worship also include a preschool or a daycare. And so that, as long as you're reporting that correctly to the county, that's going to change what your interim and final standards will be. They're not going to expect, if half of your building is used for a preschool, they're not going to expect that the whole building, that you need to meet that 32. You're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle there, if that makes sense. And one thing I know, this webinar today is really aimed at the folks who are not meeting BEPS, but I just want to say that about 35% of houses of worship and faith-based schools are currently meeting this, which means that they don't have to make any real changes in their building operations or equipment in order to meet BEPS. Like there may be things that come up maintenance-wise or building usage-wise, but right now, we're really focused on that 65% of folks that are going to need to find some way to save energy and money. So one thing I want to do live with you all right now is to talk about to look up kind of where different buildings are at. And so you can use this tool that Montgomery County has to see both where your building is at, see where other buildings are at. And this I find is a really great tool that like the folks here can take to other decision makers in your communities to say like, look, here are the numbers. This is where we're at. Here's what we need to do in the next 5 years. I want to do an example. I want to look up an example congregation. And I know Stu is here from Adat Shalom, right, Stu? Awesome. Could you share the Adat Shalom address really quick? I don't have it memorized.
So it's one of the first on the list, Persimmon Tree Road. you use Alt F for Persimmon Tree Road.
Okay, 7727, I'm
Yeah, that's
guessing.
it. That's the one.
So
Persimmon.
and we'll put this link in the chat right now so that everybody can kind of pull up your building at the same time. So what we're using as an example is a Dot Shalom Reconstructionist congregation, which is Stu's synagogue, and one of the congregations that we know will have to do a little bit of work to be able to meet BEPS. So when you pull up a building using this really cool tool, it tells you kind of all about it. It talks about the current benchmarking data. So like benchmarking data is your energy usage that you submit every year to the county. And so we can see that the property is just used as a worship facility. There's also some parking. And so this means that, you know, the BEP standard that this building will have to meet is the worship facility standard, which makes good sense. Kind of where you're at is based on this baseline of data. So this is the first couple of years that the synagogue had to do benchmarking. And we can see, you know, kind of what was used natural gas wise, what was used electricity wise. But the part that I think is the most helpful is kind of what's the baseline. So this NN site EUI column will kind of show you where you're at currently, what the standard is, and what your final standard is. And so you'll note that if you're more than a certain percentage off of the final standard, they don't make you hit that final standard. It's like it makes you just drop below a certain amount of where you're at. So right now in five years, a Dot Shalom will have to hit an EUI of 55.1. And right now they're at 62.9. And so Stu can take this to the folks in charge of things at his congregation and can say, look, you know, here's the work that we have to do in the next 5 years, not only to meet these BEP standards, but also to, you know, make sure we're saving ourselves energy and money that we'd love to use for other things. I'm wondering if anybody else has a congregation, anybody else wants to shout out an address for a BEPS congregation that we can look up again, just to have a second example.
We have 9601 Cedar Lane. That's Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Congregation.
Perfect. Let's do that. Awesome. Okay, so, and it pulls up a lot. When you type in an address, it pulls up anything that kind of matches it. But we know usually it's the top one that you'll pick. So this is Cedar Lane UU Church. Again, top property use worship facility. And we can scroll down and see that, you know, they're doing a little bit better than a Dot Shalom in terms of what their usage is on site. But you can see there's still just a little bit of work that needs to be done to meet this interim standard and then the final standard. So comparing this, you know, folks at Cedar Lane can take this to their decision makers, but you can also see that the gap between this latest performance and the interim or final standard is significantly smaller than in the last example. And so kind of what each congregation will consider that they need to do will be a little bit different, you know, comparatively. So thanks for that example. And I think Ethan put in the chat the link to this tool so that you can look up your own building. If you're not sure whether your building is covered by BEPS, we can tell you directly from looking at it. We have a spreadsheet that Emily sent us for the whole county. It may be that some of the folks on here tonight are from buildings that are small enough that they don't have to do this, but that doesn't mean that the resources we talk about tonight won't be useful to you as well.
Someone's asking about that. If they can't find their building on this list, is it probably because it's too small? Or is there?
Probably, or the address is slightly off. But if your building's not on this, then it's probably too small. But we can confirm that for sure for you.
And if it's too small to being required to meet a BEP standard, that doesn't mean it's too small to be like worthwhile to do energy upgrades. And
Absolutely. Like everybody wants to save energy and money. And so most of these resources that I'm about to talk about will be useful for everyone on this call. There's one resource that will only be for folks that aren't meeting BEPS. But everything, there's a lot available in Montgomery County, which is really great. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Let me find the right tab. Okay. Okay, so now you've looked at that online tool and have realized, your building's not meeting BEPS and you don't know where to start, what project should we focus on first? And again, I give this with the caveat that I'm not a building engineer, or somebody that does energy audits. And so I can share what kind of things that have worked for other congregations, like main areas to focus, with the caveat then that every building will be different in terms of like what you can actually do to save money and energy. So if you're one of those folks like Cedar Lane that's a little bit closer to the BEP standards, and this is something everybody should think about, but like in terms of meeting BEPS, this is a focus if you're closer to the standard. So LED light bulbs, lighting sensors, and smart thermostats. Lewis, who is the engineer at DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection for the county, has said that these are the number one things that folks can do that can save them energy and money. So that, like, again, these are the number one low cost option, and the first thing you should do if your building hasn't done this. And I know sometimes the lighting in worship facilities can be complicated if you've got, really high ceilings and lots of different parts of the building. But taking the time now to invest in a lighting project, especially one that you can get lots of incentives for through some of the resources that we'll be talking about, is a really smart thing. As well as, making sure that your HVAC equipment and your rooms are on smart thermostats. So that way you're not wasting energy there. Like these are sort of the baseline, easiest things that you can do. And there's money out there to be able to help pay for all of these things. And I want to make sure that, you can leave today knowing about that money and how to access it. So again, these are the easy things that everyone should be doing at home too. And then one thing we always like to talk about are heat pumps and heat pump hot water heaters. So heat pumps are an efficient electric way to heat and cool buildings. And they're much more efficient than gas or oil furnace that many folks might be using currently. And so this picture on the right is a picture of the indoor heat pump part of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring. They did a big electrification project a couple of years ago, that I'll talk more about in a little bit. It's not quite, the sexy photo of solar panels, but it's still fun to like see like what does that actually look like. This picture over on the left, somebody is dressed as a heat pump, which this is one of our favorite pictures from some advocacy work in Annapolis. And the sign says, "Do heat pumps work in Maryland? They yabba dabba do." And the idea here being that, if you're heating and cooling your building the most efficiently, then that's going to move you towards meeting BEPS standards. And there's money out there to be able to support these kinds of upgrades, although they can be expensive and involve a lot of work. And so we want to make sure that folks know, like, if your HVAC equipment is going and coming to the end of its life, then choosing like the most efficient option to move forward on is what's going to get you that much closer or past meeting BEPS. Okay, this is the more fun topic, I will say, of solar. Not that heat pumps aren't fun, but solar is especially fun. So in Montgomery County, you can actually use solar to help you meet BEPS. And solar saves you quite a bit of money. It depends on the project, obviously. Like people always ask me, what's the average saved? And I can't give an average, but there's a lot of money to be saved by doing a solar project, and that also will help you get closer to meeting BEPS if you're getting your energy from a cleaner source. I will say we're on a bit of a timeline in terms of the federal tax credit. And so if your congregation is interested in solar, right now is the time to be thinking about it. So please get in touch with me and we can talk about, how to make a solar project happen and how to make it so that you can still get the tax credit for that project. This is a picture of the solar at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Fairland, with some like very excited people below the solar, the Episcopal Diocese of Washington's Creation Care team. And they look really excited to have solar at that church. This is probably the hardest project out of all of them, but I wanted to mention it because houses of worship are doing this and it is having a big impact. So we talked about heat pumps. Mainly what we were talking about is known as air source heat pumps. And so they just use the temperature of the outside air to heat and cool your building. Geothermal uses the main temperature of the ground. Like when you don't have to go very far in the ground for it to be like one set temperature. And I don't know if Bob from St. Camillus is here, but St. Camillus Catholic Church, they have a school attached to their church, and they are exploring a geothermal system for their church, and they're getting a lot of it funded through grants. And then they had part of the study to figure out how to do this was funded by the Green Bank, which I'm going to talk more about later. But this is a picture of them drilling a test well in the parking lot. Very exciting. And this is the most efficient way to heat and cool a building is doing a ground source or geothermal heat pump. And it's possible, it is expensive, but people are finding out a way to do it. And so I wanted to highlight that here as sort of like a case study of it's possible, people are doing it, and it's going to help this school meet BEPS when they're not currently. Okay, and you might be saying, but Maddie, how do we actually do any of these things? Like that all sounds great, but how do we do these things? So the first thing I want to mention, this is the resource that's only available for folks that are not meeting BEPS. So you have to be able to find your building in that tool and scroll down to the bottom and see where it says no for the interim or final standard. The county has an engineer who is willing to go out and do an engineering consult for buildings that are not currently meeting BEPS and to help you come up with some places to start. This is pretty awesome. There's no other jurisdiction that is doing this that has BEPS, and so please, please, please take advantage of it. I'm hoping that folks on here, we can get several folks signed up to be able to take advantage of Lewis and his expertise to be able to come out to your building. He'll walk through it with you, look at all of your equipment, and then put together a report for you. And again, this is not the equivalent of like a full-blown energy audit, but it is a chance to get an expert who's not trying to sell you something into your building, whose like really only goal is to be able to help you meet BEPS. And the options I'm talking through right now and the resources, we're going to have a form in a little bit that folks can fill out to let us know so we can put you in direct touch with Lewis or with any of these other resources that we're going to mention. So one of the things I want to mention as well is that Maryland has an energy efficiency program called Empower that everybody is paying into on your energy bill. So you might be looking at your Pepco or Washington gas bill and see an Empower surcharge. And that pays for this project. And this is available, these things are available to anybody who pays a Pepco or Washington gas bill in the state of Maryland. And other utilities too, but since you folks are from Montgomery County. Um, what we can do, we can get you in touch with a provider who can do a free energy walkthrough for any small commercial customer. And this is often mostly focused on lighting upgrades. So if you know you haven't done lighting upgrades and you want a professional to come in and tell you, okay, this is exactly how many lights would need to be done, and this is what it would cost. And here are the incentives that Pepco would pay towards that project. We can get you a free energy walkthrough for somebody that can come out to your building. Again, look at your equipment. Again, this is not a energy audit by any means, but it is free and it is pretty useful from what I've heard from other congregations that have done this. The key with these, and so Empower often offers incentives for all types of energy efficiency equipment, from light bulbs, smart thermostats, to they also offer incentives for heat pumps, both ground source and air source, as well as energy efficient appliances. The key to be able to access this money and use it is that you must use one of their approved contractors to get incentives, and you have to get your project approved ahead of time. I've had people come to me who said, we just put in mini split heat pumps in our congregation. Like, can we get some money from Pepco for it? And the answer is no, unless you've started out in the process with one of their approved contractors. And so, if you're considering one of these projects, please let us know so we can make sure to put you. I have contacts with all the different utilities and the guys that run these programs, and can put you in direct touch with them to make sure that they can help you find a provider and get your project, get it as many funds as it's eligible for, because I don't want folks to miss out on funds. And this is for basically everything energy related except solar. This doesn't include solar or anything like that. What they can also do is spread out the cost of doing these upgrades on your Pepco bill for a period of 24 months. So that way you don't have to pay for it all up front. You'll be paying for it spread out on your Pepco bill, and that's an option that's worked well for some congregations in the past. Okay, this is my favorite resource. Woo! Is we are so lucky to be in Montgomery County and have the Montgomery County Green Bank. It's much harder across the state to access financing and funds for both solar and energy efficiency, energy upgrade projects. And the Montgomery County Green Bank is awesome. They're amazing. They want to fund your project. They love working with houses of worship and schools. And so, we talked about spreading out the cost over 24 months on your Pepco bill. Well, the Green Bank can finance, whole big energy upgrade projects or solar projects. They have this money, they want to use it. They want to use it to benefit the community, and they love working with nonprofits and often offer lower interest rates than you're going to get anywhere else, except for maybe a denominational loan fund. They also have a technical assistance program that can help pay for the cost of an energy audit for a congregation. So if you aren't meeting BEPS and you have Lewis, the engineer, come out and you decide, okay, what we really need, is a full-blown energy audit. Well, the technical assistance program at the Green Bank can help you pay for that. They also help pay for other things like the geothermal study that St. Camillus did. And in general, like they're just a great partner to work with, and really they want to help folks meet BEPS and they want to finance these projects. And we have a great working relationship with the Green Bank. Finally, the last thing I'll add is that IPL-DMV, our organization, we have a program with a provider called ThinkBox that's designed to holistically look at energy upgrades throughout your building. So the idea is that, we've paid a retainer fee to ThinkBox to be able to have them put together like full building energy upgrade projects for any congregation that we send them. And what they do is they can look at solar plus, replacing a terrible old boiler, plus doing lighting, maybe there's some windows that need to be replaced that would help with energy efficiency. And so they can look at all of that, manage all of the different subcontractors, and basically work as on your team as you're trying to undertake these projects. And so if that approach is something that folks are interested in, please let us know. We would love to put you in touch. Um, and yeah, there's especially given the good financing that's available from the Montgomery County Green Bank, like right now is the time to be doing these sorts of holistic projects that look at everything. Um, yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. I can't remember if I'm turning it back to Joelle.
I think it's me.
Yeah.
Um, I did want to shout out one point that got made in the chat that is worthwhile, which is that because people were talking about community solar and things that congregations might subscribe to or do that are green, that are not on the like physically about the energy generation in the building. And Emily answered this question, but um, uh, green things that are supporting clean energy generation somewhere else are very good to do, and they're green, but do not help you comply with BEPS. BEPS is about the physical usage of energy
Yeah.
on your
Mhm.
actual
Yeah,
site.
community solar is really great. I encourage everybody to sign up for community solar. And houses of worship can sign up for community solar as long as there's open like subscription slots available. Um, but for BEPS purposes, it like Emily said in the chat, it would have to be like the what's on your physical building at your site that's connected to your electric meter.
Um, so in a minute, Ethan's going to put in the chat a link to a form that's going to give everyone on the call tonight. And I see 24 people here. I hope we get, 2 dozen forms. Just an action form that will give you a chance to, please double click on that right now. It will give you a chance to share one thing that you got out of tonight, one thing you're looking to learn more about. Just let us know where you are in this process or what brought you here. I want to invite everyone to sort of stand up and be counted. And as we get ready to do that, um, I hope you'll let me wonk out with you about Jewish mysticism for another minute around counting the Omer. um, because we are at this as you think about what is the next step for your congregation, I should say, in addition to the next steps on what Maddie presented about BEPS compliance or meeting BEPS standards or energy upgrades, we also heard from Stu at the beginning about the Montgomery County Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions that is a really beautiful multi-faith collective that is supporting all kinds of climate action, climate education in Montgomery County. And so one of the questions on the form is just an opportunity to get connected to MCFACS and be part of what MCFACS is doing. So one of the things that's really cool about the counting the Omer is that it's come to have this like mystical meaning. So there are 7 weeks of 7 days, and um, and there's an attribute of the divine. This is like mind-blowing, but there's an attribute of God associated with each of the 7 weeks, and then also with each of the 7 days of each week. So for example, chesed means loving kindness, and gevura means strength or boundaries, and tiferet means beauty. And so um, so you can see that over 7 weeks of 7 days, there are 49 unique combinations of attributes of God. So you ask yourself, what is it like to have kindness within kindness? And what does it look like to have kindness within boundaries within kindness? And what does it look like? Um, so you can see that we're about to count the last day here, and that bottom right corner there is Malchut within Malchut. So Malchut is like it's literally kingship. So we can talk about leadership or sovereignty, or like what leads you? What is to whom do you serve, and before whom do you stand? And so we're about to count the day that is leadership within leadership, or something like that. So I was thinking that um that a way to kind of take a teaching from that Omer night we're about to count, as you begin to fill out this action form, would be that like your leadership within your congregation, within your school, to bring your building into greater alignment with your values, that your leadership be accountable to the core values and the purposes for which your congregation exists, that is the way you could express Malchut with inside of Malchut, or leadership within leadership, by taking the next step with us tonight. So with that, I'm gonna share the music again and give everyone a few minutes to double click on that link in the chat and submit the form on behalf of the facility for which you came to this webinar tonight. With that, we have arrived at the moment that you can join Jewish communities around the world who have now, with this evening as the sun goes down, arrived at the final counting of who have counted up until now. They have counted 6 weeks and 6 days. I'm going to do the final counting of the Omer, and then we will formally conclude the presentation, but we're going to stay on the line if people want to ask Maddie or Emily questions, and talk more informally for a little while. We'll be here. Hayom Tisha v'Arba'im Yom. Today is 49 days. Shehem Shavuot Laomer, which is 7 weeks of the Omer. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you for being part of this good work with the Montgomery County Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions and with our Clean Energy Shepherd program.